Hey, I'd like to welcome you to another episode of the Mission Matters Entertainment Podcast, your source for all things entertainment. My name is Adam Torres. You can follow me on Instagram at AskAdamTorres. Keep up with my book releases, book tour schedule, signings, all that other good stuff. Always love to connect with you there. And as always, if you'd like to apply to become a co-author of one of my upcoming books, just head on over to the website, missionmatters.com, and click on Become an Author to apply. All right, today I have Pavlina Osta on the line, and she's Executive Director and Producer of National Podcasts over at Salem Media Group, and she's host of If God Had a Podcast. Pavlina, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me on, Adam. How you doing?
Oh, I'm fantastic, and I'm excited to get into your podcast today, If God Had a Podcast. I'm like, my title of my podcast is not quite that unique. I'm excited to listen to it. But before we do that, let's get a little bit into what you're doing over at Salem Media Group. So tell us a little bit more about the company, please.
Yeah, for sure. So Salem Media Group is, they have a political, they're just a traditional radio network, but they have a political side and a religious side. I work on the political side on all of our national shows, and they're actually the reason I moved up to New York City. So I was barely 18, and I got an internship on one of the local shows, and kind of worked my way up as producer. And then when I was 19, I started a department within the company for digital media, podcasting, live streaming, all that stuff for the national hosts, and that's where I get my current title. I've been working on that for the past couple of years, and yeah, it's been great. It's a great place to work. I love it.
So, pretty impressive. First of all, starting a podcast division, all these things at 19, that's amazing. So you're definitely helping pioneer, and that's one of the reasons I'm excited to have you on the show. Is I love promoting other podcasters and podcasts, and let's just get right into it. So, if God had a podcast, what inspired you to do this podcast?
Yeah, so I started my radio show when I was 11. 11 to 18 is how long I had, my radio show, and it was syndicated on iHeartRadio and everything. And when I moved up here and I was working at Salem, and I eventually, went to college, graduated a year early, but I stopped doing my radio show because it was just so hard to, work full time and go to school full time. And that was such a big part of my life that I missed, just being on air and doing all that stuff. So that's when I started the podcast, was in July of 2019. So still pretty new, it's still a pretty new podcast. But yeah, I just missed, being on air and interviewing really fascinating newsmakers or, thought-provoking people. My podcast mostly focuses on people that are like entrepreneurial, they're motivators. Like it's a very inspiring kind of podcast, or informational. So, and I think that stuff is all very interesting, and so do my listeners. So it's a great time.
Tell me a little bit more about the format. So, like, what's the normal length of show? Give me a little bit more about the format.
For sure. So it's about 20 to 30 minutes, depending. I like to go pretty in depth with either stories that they're talking about, or like the research that they've been covering. But yeah, it's around 20 to 30 minutes.
And in terms of, obviously you've been on air for a long time, but just to give us kind of a flavor of the content, this is a loaded question, so I apologize in advance, because it's like making you choose between all your babies and all the different stories. So what was one of your favorite episodes or favorite stories that you have from the podcast?
Oh my gosh. Okay.
Loaded question. I know, that's terrible, and I hope nobody ever asks me that question when I'm being interviewed, because I'll be in trouble, but I did it to you, so you go.
I love it. Yeah, so, and people always ask me that with my interviews growing up, because I interviewed celebrities, and I always loved, trying to figure out which one I liked the most, or, it was always the one that I just did. I was like, that was my favorite, whatever. But with the podcast, oh my gosh, I really liked my first interview. Like, that was a lot of fun. It was Heather Monahan, who, she actually has her own podcast. She's fantastic. But I talked to her about her book, Confidence Creator, I believe is the title of it. Yeah, and it's a great book, and it's really like a guide to building confidence. And I just thought that was a great way to start off the podcast, and I loved that one. I interview a lot of people because I am obsessed with TED Talks. I listen to them all the time when I'm getting ready in the morning and different stuff like that. So I love interviewing really interesting TED Talk speakers. So And actually, I've kind of doubled up the work that I've done with my podcast has also been research for the book that I just finished and is in editing right now. But so I've been able to, kind of cross the two. And yeah, but I think, gosh, there's just so many interesting topics. I talked to a couple of different guests about the imposter syndrome, and I just thought that was fascinating. And they're just different, researchers, doctors that, do all of this work on studying patients with, the imposter syndrome and how to help them get through it, and they write books and stuff. And it's just amazing. So you'll have to check out the podcast to, find your favorite episode.
I love it. It's all great stuff.
Yeah.
What was one of the funnier moments on your podcast? Like, was there anything that just sticks out where you're like, oh my gosh, I can't believe that happened? I'm just curious. There may not be, but sometimes there's some weird things that happen on the podcast.
Yeah, nothing really crazy has happened. I don't know. I think it's always happening so quick. Like, I live, here in New York City, and I feel like I'm just in and out of the studio so fast. Like, I try to, we usually become friends because we have like conversations before and after, and or
That's
we'll
awesome.
I usually like to FaceTime them or Skype before the interview so we can get the lay of the land, and then we'll talk about stuff. But there's never really been anything that's crazy or funny that's happened. I don't know.
There's a lot of people listening right now that are considering or have wanted to launch a podcast or do something like that. What are some of the, those intangible, those benefits to where you're like, man, you should 100% do your podcast? Because I preach to people all day long, and I'm like, you should be definitely doing a podcast. Like, are you kidding me? Why wouldn't you share this message and all this? It's a phone call. Come on. Just do it. What would be some of those intangibles and those words of wisdom you would give to somebody that's listening right now that's been wanting to do a podcast, but they're still sitting on the fence?
Well, see, the beautiful thing about podcasting is everyone gets a voice. You know what I mean? Millennials, I talk a lot about millennials and Gen Zs because I like to study the psychology behind them because they're just such a fascinating generation. And first of all, I'm a Gen Z, but millennials, they're the biggest generation right now. So they're affecting all these different things. But one thing they love to do is they love to make a change. They like to have an impact. And you can have an impact by having a podcast because you have this ability to put it out into the world. You can promote it, do social media. Everyone has this accessibility, whereas, in radio, it's not, there's too many roadblocks. You can't.
It's hard. It's expensive. It's hard. Yeah.
Yeah, and everyone has a story. Everyone has, experiences that they've learned from, and just things like that you can share with people, and you can really make a difference, and you can help them in different ways. Or, I don't know. I don't think it's not hard to start a podcast. It's pretty easy. You can just get a microphone. You could do it in your apartment. You know what I mean?
I recorded my first. You don't even need that. You don't even need that. I recorded my first 300 episodes on my iPhone with regular, not even iPod, not even iPad, whatever, pod earbuds, nothing, the literal white cord hanging down on my 300 episodes. I built an audience before I even thought of a mic, and I had a mic already from something else laying in the background, and I was too lazy to hang it up or to hook it up. I was like, let's just see. I don't know about this podcasting thing. And I do it full time, right? 2,000 episodes later.
It's so easy to edit. You don't need any kind of equipment. You know what I mean? Just get it up there and
That's what I tell people.
It's just so much fun. And it's so fun. Don't you love doing this? It's the best.
Oh my gosh,
it's
are
awesome.
you kidding me? The stories. One of my favorite ones is how to pronounce your name. Do you want to tell everyone or no?
I've been saying that my whole life.
I know, so say it for me. Tell the audience how you say it, please.
Yes. Okay, so everyone's like, how do you say your name? And I'm like, it's Pavlina Osta. Osta like pasta.
I can't.
Everyone says Osta, and I'm just like, it's not Osta, it's Osta. Osta like pasta.
Osta like pasta, all right?
Yes. Every time I say that, no one ever forgets. You can't mess it up after that. I don't know what it is, but it's worse. I just came up with. I was actually I remember when I first said it. I was I think I was 14, and I was at the Hot 97 radio station, and they were interviewing me on one of the shows, and I think it was Laura, I don't remember who the host was, or, because there were three of them, and she, couldn't pronounce my last name, and I was like, Osta, Osta, and I was, trying to, think of something that, rhymed with it, and I was like, pasta, that's perfect, And it became a whole thing on the show. And I was like, this is great. So I've just been saying it for the past, 6 years. You know what I mean? It's fantastic.
Oh my gosh, that's awesome.
Yeah,
well, Pavlina, it's been great having you on the show. If somebody's listening to this and they want to follow up and they want to catch your podcast, what's the best way for them to connect with you and your other things you're doing?
Most definitely. So you can follow me on all the social sites. Everything is at Pavlina Osta, OSTA. And yeah, the links are always on there. I'm always posting about it. My podcast is everywhere, iTunes, Spotify, the works. It's called If God Had a Podcast. And, if you follow me on the social sites, you'll also not only get updates on, podcast episodes that are coming out, but a bunch of other exciting things that I'm doing. I have a book coming out probably May, June. So keep your ear out for that because that's going to be, I'm very excited about that coming out.
Exciting.
So that's about it.
We'll have to have you back on when that comes out so we can definitely talk more about the book.
I would love that. That would be so fun. I think your audience would like it.
So, perfect. And we will do that. So thanks again, Pavlina, for coming on the show. It's been awesome. Been fun. And to the audience, as always, thank you for tuning in. Hope you got a lot of value out of this. Hope you had a lot of fun listening because we had fun making this for you. If you did, don't forget, subscribe to the podcast, leave me a review. If you're watching this on our YouTube channel, Mission Matters Entertainment, then definitely give that a subscribe, but also leave us some comments on the video. Love to keep the conversation going. Let's not let it end here. Let's move it over to the YouTube community. And Pavlina, thanks again for coming on the show.